Susan Gardner here from Municipal World. We're at the 2019 Fall Workshop for the Ontario Municipal Administrators Association. Joining me in the Municipal World Media Center is Sandeep Aujla. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Susan. It's my pleasure.
So, tell me a little bit about what it is you do.
Sure. So I run a company called Multi-Level Leadership Consulting, and primarily our focus is on change strategy and HR strategy. So by training, I am an organizational psychology practitioner.
Okay.
So I'm very driven by data, and what we do is look at what's happening in an organization and what type of forces of change they're experiencing, both internal to the organization and external. And based on that, we work with the senior leadership to create a change strategy that's unique to that organization.
Okay.
Yeah.
So municipalities, of course,
Yes.
always dealing with a lot of change issues in the midst, always of change issues and expecting more to come their way.
Yes.
Have you worked with local governments?
In the last year, have begun to work, primarily I work in public sector. Municipalities, I would say I'm relatively new to them. But what I'm learning very quickly is that we have unbelievable, almost unprecedented changes, especially in Ontario, but I'm sure that's the case across municipalities.
Absolutely.
And as part of the session that we're working on with OMAA, what I have realized in looking at the data is that we have an overwhelming, a record number of unplanned changes. So when you talk about changes, there are things we know we have to do and things that you can't predict. And the challenge is very peculiar because typically all the forecasting, whether it's around budgets or planning, it's always done based on predictability.
Yes.
And if you are talking about events that you can't even predict, things that seem almost unnecessary or out of the blue, now how do you tackle those changes?
How do you manage? How do you plan?
Yes, so they require very different strategies as compared to typical change management planning, which we still don't do well enough, but this is an even greater challenge when it's unplanned change.
So what kind of changes are we talking about specifically?
So looking at the current state in Ontario, I would say what we've looked at the data, over 70% of the changes actually relate to funding related issues, and the remaining are primarily around provincial legislative changes. What implications that has is when you start digging deeper, the top 5 changes we saw, number 1 was around Bill 108. So it's this omnibus bill which is impacting so many pieces of legislation. Ontario Municipal Partnership Fund. Now, some may say that's very unique to the rural and northern municipalities, but it's a huge implication for 88% of municipalities in Ontario. Third, just general funding changes and challenges. A lot of municipalities are not as stable as they would like to be from a fiscal perspective. There were 2 others. Oh, the regional review. It's a big impending change that people. Yes. I think we'll find out very soon.
Yeah.
After the election, that's another huge one. And the last, I can't remember the 5th one now, but those are the bigger categories. All the cuts that have happened to which were previously provincially mandated services. So healthcare cuts, childcare cuts. Land ambulance. These have major implications for not just how municipalities are run, but how are they going to support the programs that they have.
Big impacts
Huge.
on service delivery and on communities.
Yes.
So, looking at all these changes, what sorts of strategies are you recommending for municipalities to deal with this? How do you deal with change that you can't plan for, manage, or anticipate?
Yes, definitely a unique challenge, but based on my research and work, I have come up with this 5S. It's not the McKinsey 5S model, but it's a 5S approach to making sure that you're thoughtfully considering all the facets that go into planning for unplanned change. So, as much as that's an oxymoron, first of all, it really starts with the CAO. And I'm not suggesting top-down leadership, but the CAO has to do some reflection in terms of how he or she is defining success. I have met CAOs who think amalgamation will be the end or failure to the municipality. Whatever tone they set in interpreting what changes may or may not be coming down and the impact directly has an implication on how the rest of the municipality will work with it. So that's a self piece, and there are many facets to it, but I'll give you one each. The second is around strategy. Most municipalities do have a good strategic plan, but when you take a good look, less than half of them have a concrete commitment to fiscal sustainability. At least in Ontario, given the challenges we have around funding, my biggest recommendation would be every single municipality should look at their strategic plans, and if they don't already have dedicated fiscal sustainability priority, absolutely, please consider establishing that. The third is around structure. And I know that there are different types of structures across different municipalities, but the number one role that a CEO can play is in figuring out if your organization is fostering cooperation within operations and with the environment. And by that I mean government, other municipalities, because when things are unplanned, you cannot do traditional top-down leadership.
It requires collaboration
Absolutely,
now.
more than ever before, because you'll be pooling resources, you'll be pooling information, and you may not have a lot of leeway into acting on the changes that will come down. So partnerships go a very long way, both internally and externally. The fourth is systems, and this is very much about what type of inputs, processes, and outcomes your services and programs are generating. So the good news is, one of the things that data showed is the number one things most municipalities are doing, over 35% I believe, are service reviews. And my invitation would be, how many are actually implementing the recommendations from the service reviews? We've been doing service reviews for a very long time.
Yes.
But are we actually doing something with them? And last but not least, we have storytelling. And what I mean by that is, in times of crisis or in times of unplanned or unpredicted change, the number one role, and communication is important in change management, but the number one role in managing all the fears and anxieties that your staff is feeling at every level is when the leader actually practices something called preventable leadership style, which is not very common.
Explain this to me.
Okay, so research shows that most leaders, when they are addressing their staff or even their leaders across the hierarchy, they're all about, we have a vision, everything's going well, what are we going to accomplish? So it's very promotion based. But when things are in crisis, staff will not believe your message if you're not actually honoring them as adults and telling them what has happened in the environment, what impact will it have for a municipality, what resources we do or don't have to tackle that, what role we need our staff to play during that time, and then show progress. The number one thing in motivating employees now is the progress principle. If you can show there is something you're doing that is moving you in the right direction, it inspires people to continue down that path. So it's a combination of these 5 sets of strategies. I know it's a lot, but it's that systematic approach, because a number of people, about 25%, that looking at the data, have said they're waiting.
Did you have the sense, looking at it, that CAOs, leaders, had a sense of being powerless in the face of these changes? And
a few of them,
yeah,
and I think it definitely requires a time of compassion. But, and I'm not, I am an optimist, but not, I'm a pragmatic optimist.
Yeah.
So there are still things within our control, and that's what working with unplanned change is about. It's proactive preparation and a willingness to pivot. If you can do that, you are going to make the best of your situation. But waiting and watching may not be the most productive approach.
There are positive, proactive things that you can
Yes.
do while you're waiting
Yes.
to prepare your organization.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So CAOs, there's in a great position to take advantage of some of these opportunities to do things now and make sure their organization is strong when the changes they know are coming.
Yes, it is
Yes.
hard. It's hard to imagine that so much chaos and turbulence is presenting opportunities. But that's how history shows us new opportunities and successes have come from unexpected things. So there is an opportunity for sure.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Sandeep.
It's my pleasure.
For coming in and chatting.
Thank you so much.
I'm Susan Gardner for Municipal World, here with Sandeep Aujla. We share your stories.